Welcome to the Nick, Dick, and Paul Show. I am one of your hosts, Nick Bilton, who is a star of sound and stage.
See what Costolo, pediatrician.
Are you licensed?
Slightly. Ever so slightly licensed.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll work out fine.
I'm licensed-ish.
Licensed-ish. Paul Kedrosky, venture capitalist. No role in pediatrician.
But what you are...
Or pediatrics, actually.
Pediatrics, yes.
Yeah.
You almost were a doctor, though, right?
I'm a doctor, but as my dad used to say, not the useful kind.
Did you actually get did you get your doctor?
Uh-huh.
Like, really?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
I'm going to always call you Dr. Kedrosky from now
Dr.
on.
Kedrosky.
Yeah.
I'm told it works. There's this guy, you may have seen at NYU, it's Gala something or other. He calls himself Dr. G, I think?
Oh,
Professor G.
Yes, Professor G. Okay, so this week's episode is going to be a little different than usual. We are going to be talking about a current event, which is Iran and oil and natural gas. We're going to get into dog food. We're going to get into EVs and a bunch of other things like that. And given that Dick Costolo is a pediatrician and Dr. Kedrosky over here is also an expert on all forms of oil, except coconut oil, we will be asking him questions. So here's my first question. So can you explain a little bit about what's going on with oil prices right now as a result of the war in Iran and why it's different from the 1970s? So in the 1970s, the cost of oil went from $2.90 per barrel before the
$2.90
$2.90. Yes, it's just insane. Before the embargo to $11.65, but now it's not as extreme of a jump. We have barrels that have gone from 90 to about 180 or so.
110, 115.
Yeah. Oh, the projection is 180. Sorry. So why has it not jumped so much, and what's different now than in terms of the 1970s?
So there's at least three things. One is that the U.S. is less dependent on international markets for oil, natural gas, for energy supplies than it was in the 1970s. So that's a really big deal, obviously, because if you're less dependent on those markets, then the prices in those changing prices in those markets doesn't affect you as much. And the reason for that is that U.S. has become a huge supplier of natural gas domestically. So we actually are our own supplier. Like something like only 3% of U.S. natural gas product ends up being exported. It's a tiny fraction. And there's a similar story with respect to oil, but slightly different. The U.S. is now the largest supplier of oil worldwide, largely because of the expansion of shale oil in the Permian Basin. And the difference is, though, we are more exposed to oil than to natural gas, despite being a large supplier. And this always confuses people because they're like, well, we make our own here. What are we doing? We're a huge exporter. So once you're an exporter, you can think of it as like a web. Now we're tied into international markets. So it's like if the U.S. were to say, oh, we've got to sell it for lower prices domestically to make people happy. It's like, no. I can get way more by selling this stuff elsewhere. So once you're tied into export markets, then you become what's called like a price taker. You're taking the price from the international market. So in natural gas, that's not the case. We're not a huge supplier to international markets. We were largely supplying ourselves. So we're somewhat insulated from what happens.
We're more like a farm-to-table country.
We're more like
LNG, liquefied natural gas.
Yeah. No, it's totally true. We're much more like a farm to table. And so that's why these two markets. So if you look at the price of natural gas since the current episode broke out, you wouldn't know anything has happened.
Yeah.
Largely nothing has happened in the U.S. But if you look in Europe, Western Europe, you look in Southeast Asia, dramatic impact because they're all importers of natural gas. And so they're much more dependent on the prices that are changing as a result of what's happening in the Middle East. So those two are two of the biggest factors. The other one is, and this is one that people misuse the statistic, but it's really important, is the energy intensity of U.S. GDP has declined dramatically over time, meaning that for every unit of energy that we use in the economy, we're producing more dollars of GDP. So if you imagine in the limit, every dollar of GDP required a barrel of oil, and that never changes. So it's like a linear relationship. Well, then you'd have a huge problem, right? Because to grow GDP, I have to use proportionally more of the energy of that particular source of energy. The energy intensity of U.S. GDP has collapsed over the last 30 years for a host of different reasons, some of which is like changing energy sources, some of which is just what we're producing. Then there's an insidious thing that a lot of the most energy-intensive things that used to be produced here are produced somewhere else. So we get to say, oh, it's way less energy-intensive because energy-intensive manufacturing is happening in China and Southeast Asia. Well, I don't have to account for that. So there's all kinds of things going on. But the bottom line is that the energy intensity of what we do here in this country has changed dramatically since the 1970s. So at least those three things are happening. One,
surely that will change with AI.
Yeah,
yes?
It changes dramatically with AI because if you think about data centers as plants, manufacturing plants, it just so happens they produce tokens. They don't produce, widgets of some form. That the energy intensity of that production is immense. So they're rapidly becoming, at least at the margin, the single largest source of new energy demand in the United States. So AI is reintroducing energy intensity back into the U.S. economy. But until now, those three things were the drivers that were very exposed to oil prices because despite being one of the largest suppliers and the largest supplier in the world, we're a huge exporter, so that ties us into global markets. So what happens with, WTI, West Texas Intermediate prices are tied in turn to what's happening in Oman prices and what's happening in Brent crude and all of the other non-U.S. prices. And then natural gas, we're largely supplying ourselves, so we don't get tied into world prices. But then you have this sort of overlay of the changing how much energy is required to produce a unit of GDP, right? So these three things
I have an important follow-up question.
Yeah.
Who is the Brent in Brent crude? I know who the West Texas is.
Who is
in
the West
WTI?
Texas?
It's Permian Basin.
I literally thought you were going to ask a really
I thought you meant
important-
literally is it David Brent or something?
Yeah, I do mean
It is
that.
David Brent.
It is David
No,
Brent.
it's not David Brent.
Damn it.
Yeah, it was a deposit in the North Sea. So
there you go.
Yeah.
So
that price is like a Northern European price. So one of the strange things is if you look at, we talk here about West Texas Intermediate prices, right?
I talk about West Texas Intermediate prices
when people talk
literally all the time.
When people talk about the price
Just
of a barrel
before
of
we
oil,
got on here, I was out there like blah, 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 WTI.
Don't get me started. But when people in the U.S. talk about the price of a barrel, that's what they're talking about mostly, is the price of West Texas crude. But that is if you actually look at what's happening in the Middle East, the price of other barrels, whether it's Brent crude or Oman crude, that's actually spiked to $165 a barrel. So even though we are part of the global markets, we are still somewhat insulated because if we were directly exposed, prices here would already be considerably higher than they are. So what we've got is like a damping effect because of domestic supply.
So if this is the case, why the markets, everything is responding? The interest rates, the markets, everything is a result of what's happening. Is there an assumption that this is worse, or is it actually a bad thing for the economy?
Oh, it's a horrific thing because just because the energy intensity of GDP is declining doesn't mean that energy itself is less important. We're using vastly more energy globally than we were 50 years ago, even if the U.S. is somewhat peaking in terms of its total energy usage, which will change with AI data centers. But oil, if you go skiing and you wear Gore-Tex clothes, you're wearing oil. If you're eating food, it was probably fertilized with something that was passed through the Strait of Hormuz at some point. It's a pretty decent chance you're eating an oil byproduct, right? It's one of the reasons why the doomsters back in the 60s were all wrong with respect to the U.S. there being a population crash. Paul Ehrlich famously predicted one. It's because they didn't understand that.
Remember Paul Ehrlich famously predicted one, Dick?
Yeah, I do remember that. He was born in the house next to David Brent. Enough.
I have a story.
A lot of people don't know that.
I have a good Paul Ehrlich story, but I won't tell you. So what happened then is we
all have a good Paul Ehrlich story, but keep going.
Okay. So we're essentially eating oil. We wear oil. We drive oil. And so that's the difference, right? So it's ubiquity with respect to everything that's happening in the economy is why it's so material. And then secondarily, other economies around the world to be affected. So our export markets are affected. So that changes the likelihood of companies being able to sell products at the rate at which they previously were. So it's just ripples everywhere.
To your point about every incremental dollar of GDP being less reliant on
and energy writ large.
Yeah. In the U.S., why isn't the inverse true for China? And then why aren't they more agitated about all this?
So the inverse is true for China. Like the energy intensity.
I knew
GDP
that, which was my leading question. You see what I did there?
Yeah, it was
I
very
was
good.
like, aha.
I got away for
It is true for China?
the
Yeah.
energy intensity of
They're
GDP.
the ones doing all the
They're
manufacturing.
the ones doing, because essentially we're playing this shell game of pushing the most energy intensive things other than data centers, pushing it offshore and then saying, kudos to us. We've managed to become less reliant on the most energy intensive activities like smelting and what have you.
Yeah. So why aren't they more agitated and up in arms about all this?
Well, because they're currently still getting lots of supply, right?
Yeah.
So one of if you look at the ships that are traveling through the Strait of Hormuz and still supplying, there's a vastly smaller number, but they tend to be ones headed for China, India, and other countries that still have very energy-intensive economies. So they're seeing higher prices, but it's not like they're being starved entirely of supply.
I see. And is that because Iran is sort of like, hey, the last thing we want to do is
It's
upset our
because Iran historically has been a patron state.
I was just going to say.
Right. So they're working with their patron.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Do you know what percentage of oil comes from Iran now?
It depends on which country.
Which country?
Globally, like where it's seated.
It's in the teens.
It's in the teens. Wow.
Yeah.
And is Russia happy about what's going on, or
no,
are they
another patron state? So no. So
Russia's
but they also
happy
they're also creating their own. It helps them because
Russia's happy in the sense that we've limited the sanctions on Russian oil.
right,
Correct.
and that's
Yes.
been one of the byproducts
They're
of
a
all of
benefactor
this.
Yes.
Right.
of
Is
this
that
war.
some of the sanctions, like one of the perverse things that's happened is that Iranian oil continues to flow out of Iran under the watching eye of the U.S. and everyone else, because that would be create secondary, much bigger problems, and so it's flowing to places like Russia and elsewhere. But it's also flowing out of Russia because we don't want to create the impression that there's been this real pinch in supply, because that would cause a huge spike. And that's sort of the second thing, which is that oil price increases don't go directly to gas prices. So it's not like every time you see the price of a barrel of oil go up, it doesn't necessarily translate directly into it, because there's inventories in the system. It takes time for this for oil to be refined and find its way into the gasoline chain and everything else. So just because prices haven't gone up that much yet, if prices stay high in global markets for a barrel of oil, you should expect the price of the average national price of a barrel of gas to continue to go higher without any change in the price of a barrel itself. It's just it takes time to work its way through the system.
Okay, I have a provocative question. If everything you're telling us is true,
Which it may not be.
it's entirely true that you made this all up.
Let's just say, for example, that Brent crude really does stand for
David Brent?
a deposit that was found in the North Sea.
Right.
Let's just say everything you're saying is true.
Okay.
Why do we still have a strategic petroleum reserve? Like, why do we need it? Who cares?
We don't, because there's a bunch of issues with the strategic. It's more.
Do you see how I'm setting up my?
Can you
see how I'm
explain this?
setting up my question
yeah,
so
it's great.
nicely? Because
it's
almost like
you're a professional podcaster.
Yeah, it's almost like I know what the answer is before I ask the question.
But can you explain what the
So the U.S.
reserve is?
created this
Should
thing.
have been a journalist instead of a pediatrician.
I've heard many of your patients say that. So the U.S. created this thing called the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which was this idea that when required.
I like how you use acronyms all the time. SPR.
I like how he
SPR.
does it, but I like how he does it as if he was writing the paper,
I know.
the white paper.
No, it's
like
good.
SPR comes.
I learn a lot from him about how to do these things, like SPR. Oh, Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
Right. I spell it out.
For you pediatricians out there.
Anyway.
Who are up on the latest acronyms in the energy space. Was intended as a buffer in the event of disruption in global supply, that the U.S. would have its own domestic supply. And it's spread across a number of different storage locations across the United States, mostly in the South, across Texas. But nevertheless, there isn't enough storage there to make a big difference in terms of saying the U.S. could. It's like a solar panel on your roof, right?
Yeah.
It's not like I can. It's an offsetting factor, not a factor that's going to dramatically change anything. And then there's a secondary issue, which is that
you have to get it into the flow.
You have to get into flow. People confuse the idea of stocks and flows. I could have millions of barrels of oil sitting inside of the.
You can't use it tomorrow.
You can't use it tomorrow. It's not like I can just open a spigot and then all of a sudden you look down the street at Shell, prices just went down.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
It's not that farm to table.
It's not that farm to table.
It's farm to something
farm
to table.
to like larcenous middle
So
party.
is it just a PR move? Is it like a we got this all?
It's a perfect, and it's the same thing if you think back to like the financial crisis. When you started bailing people out, it wasn't because you thought this would solve anything, because you wanted to give the impression you were willing to take extreme moves to support the market. This is that.
What is the price per barrel that really screws everything? Like, is there if we hit
Like
the 200s?
the producers, you mean, or
no, that that breaks the economy.
If WTI or Brent crude go to X, then we're in trouble.
It's entirely a question of how long it goes there. So it could go to $250 for like 30 minutes tomorrow, no impact, right?
$250 for a month.
$250 for a month, you'd probably get yourself into at least a recession. So if you go out to like, say, people are modeling like 175 as a possible price, depending on what happens in the Strait of Hormuz for 6 months.
What has to happen?
That's a recession and possibly something worse.
What has to happen to the price before I stop saying Wentworth, fetch the Bentley?
I think that's
hold on. Before you answer that.
It's more of an idiosyncratic question about your tolerance for gas pipe.
I want to keep going with this. So it has to get to,
it's a question of price and time, right?
But what's affected is it's not just airline prices that go up, and it's not just gas.
Foods,
it's everything.
clothing.
You said dog food earlier.
Dog food.
Well, dog food is not because of the oil prices.
No.
That's because of the
energy intensity of producing dog food.
Yes, exactly.
Right. It's a highly energy intensive process, and so. It essentially goes through everything. Like I said, whenever you're skiing, you're wearing oil, right? I mean, all of these products, these plastics products, all are fundamentally petroleum byproducts. It's almost impossible to find something that isn't a byproduct if it's not direct. And that's the issue, right? So as soon as all of those prices start going up, and then we're fighting stagflation in the United States then, right? Where you have inflation, but because of this byproduct, this product that's price is going up, but the economy's shrinking. And that's a terrible trap because monetary policy stops working.
And what is also what exacerbates this is the fact that usually when these instances happen, they happen over long periods of time. But with this, it could happen in a very short period.
Yeah,
and the economy can break as a result of it.
Right.
And do you think that we're going to get there, or do we stop the war before that? Like, what happens?
All why questions to do with the current administration can be answered with who knows. I mean, I don't know. It's impossible to know. You would think that it's obvious the fragility in the system.
Yeah.
And it's obvious that there is no straightforward path to say, for example, securing safe transit through the Strait of Hormuz for oil tankers without having an incredible military presence on the ground there. And I don't think Americans are ready for that. I don't believe that.
The answer to that question is we should just rename it the Strait of America.
Yeah, I'm sure that's coming.
And then get Sundar to go fix Google Maps.
Right. Just relabeling things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
it worked on the Gulf.
The Gulf of Mexico/America. No, so the answer is everything in the system's telling you this needs to stop.
That joke didn't land as well as I thought it was going to.
I like the idea, though.
All right.
No, everything in the system's telling you this has to stop, right? Because any time there's even a hint that this is going to get resolved, there's a collapse, which is the flip side of collapse in prices, which is the flip side of, oh my God, if this continues, the system's going to break. And there's so many ways it can break, right? Not just in terms of consumer demand, but byproducts. We're seeing rationing across Southeast Asia where people are being told they can only use air conditioning 3 days a week. And again, because energy plays a huge role.
In one of the areas in Southeast Asia, they're basically taking Wednesday off now. Like, don't go to work on Wednesday.
Don't go to work on Wednesdays.
We need to conserve energy.
Right. And so these consequences ripple through the whole system. And then the reverse is also true, that it's now not just a snap thing that were everything to get reversed and you sign something and say this ends tomorrow. It depends on who you look at. But the IEA the other day said something like 6 months to 3 years to do the rebuilding required to get all of the natural gas supply back online, the rail lines back on. There's a long, really consequential and expensive process here. So it's not simply we signed a deal.
You also can't, you can only say things like, Iran has come to the table, we're negotiating with Iran, and Iran says, no, we're not. You can only do that a couple times before any and that's incremental announcement, true or not, doesn't have as much of an impact on
and
prices
it's also,
or the markets.
It creates this game theoretic problem where if I'm the counterparty and I see how much that causes the price to come down, I can now price my leverage.
Yeah, right.
I now know how much leverage I have because if people think I'm agreeing to something, it causes the price to go down this much. I have immense leverage now, right? And this becomes a negotiating ploy. Right. And that's what you're seeing. It makes it more difficult to get a resolution.
I have a question that may seem like a silly question to you, but to most people will not. And is...
But to the lay pediatrician, it will seem like a serious question.
Yeah. To the lay pediatrician. So that is that recently the Trump administration signed a deal to give, what is the name of it? Total Energies, $1 billion to cancel a
wind project.
A wind project, and instead invest their money into fossil fuels. Why, if we are so reliant, if the world economy, specifically the U.S. economy, is so reliant on oil coming in the strait and so on and so forth, why not invest in these alternate energies?
But that's a partisan position, right? So it's entirely driven by the idea of climate change denial and the idea that whatever the other side wants, I don't want. The other side wanted wind-generated energy, wanted more solar, so I don't want it because they wanted it. And I think there's a tiny overlay of real estate developer doesn't like the look of windmills offshore.
That's it.
Yeah.
So it's not so, but if it were not a partisan issue, but even if it's a partisan issue,
can I ask a question?
Yes.
Do we call them windmills, or do we call them something else? I have an image of a windmill in my mind.
They're called wind. What are they called
farms?
again?
Wind farms when you have a
Okay.
collection of them.
All right.
Yeah.
More than one.
But wind farms always sounds to me like I'm literally growing wind, and I'm not sure how that happens. So I just stick to the old terminology.
Fine. All right.
You can take the boy from the farm, but
Understood.
et cetera, et cetera. So this is a classic example of pursuing a self-destructive policy for irrational reasons,
Yeah.
but reasons that make sense if you're to take a partisan lens to it.
But if you're just doing the math, would it logically make sense to invest in these alternative energies, or is it from an actual energy standpoint, would it work, or is there some argument to be made by the Trump administration or the Republicans that it won't work?
That wind farms don't work?
No. When all these, so there's
Nick
been
is basically saying, like, if you removed politics from
yeah.
this and we're purely basing it on
No, then the most rational approach is what people call the all of the above.
Yeah.
So that you don't just
should do all of it.
do all of it.
Yeah.
Stop making these arbitrary decisions about solar is best, wind turbines are best,
nuclear, et cetera, et cetera.
The correct answer is all of the above, because you want to take this the sort of fuel substrate in terms of what we produce baseline power in the United States and make it as diversified as possible. So we're not relying exclusively on fossil fuels. It's not relying exclusively on wind turbines either, because there's been a bunch of papers about this idea of global quieting, the notion that wind speeds have declined dramatically over the last 30 years. So
is that right?
How is that right? We were talking about turbulence this week and how crazy it's gotten.
I love the phrase global quieting.
Yeah.
Wait, what's happened with the wind?
I want global quieting.
I didn't know you were a wind expert too.
Oh, yeah. It's my spare time.
What? Tell us about the wind.
Let's talk about global quieting.
Yeah.
So this is
That sounds so much nicer than global warming.
it sounds like it might be more peaceful anyway.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to get a lot more sleep.
So this is, I don't think it's that kind of quieting as much as I might like it. No, there's been a series of papers. I think there was one in Nature a couple of years ago showing that average wind speeds, and again, this is a very noisy signal because how do you actually sort of come up with a mean wind speed that for the whole world? So they did it on a continent by continent basis, have been declining. And there's
Can I ask a question?
A series of connections people have made back to climate change. I thought this was the question.
He has a
It's
joke.
related. But it's important. What hour in the day?
I was thinking the same exact
Did you
thing.
think to yourself, I'm going to come up to speed on the global quieting?
was literally imagining him sitting by the fire
and
with
I
his
want
dogs.
I want to tell you why I asked that question.
Please tell me why.
I don't have that hour.
Oh, I see.
I get a workout in, then I got to grab lunch, then it's like 3, I got to do a
I
little
gotta see
more
some
work.
pediatric clients.
I literally had
I
an
gotta
image
see the
of
kid with
you
the
up in your
toothache.
cabin, and your golden retriever is by your feet, and you've got like chocolate chip cookies and the coffee, and the fire's going,
a whole
and you're
host of
reading
papers on
a
global-
whole host of papers on the quietening.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
Wentworth, fetch the global quieting paper. I feel like reading. Anyway.
I need some
Okay,
bedtime
so
reading.
this is a thing that's happening.
But this is really important because it's changing the dynamics of wind energy production. But I don't want to. You just don't want to get stuck in that. What you want to say is that because of all of these dynamics,
we're going to do all of
we're
it.
going to do all of the
Yeah.
above. Right? There's an argument that the importance of solar is changing, the wind is changing, nuclear may be problematic. We're seeing what happens with fossil fuels, so you should just be pursuing all of the above. That's the real answer. Like
what
whether
is
or not
the-
global quieting is another separate issue.
I know this is a very debatable thing, but what is the prediction of how much fossil fuels we have left?
We don't know.
We just don't know.
No, we simply don't.
Is there a guesstimate? 20 years, 30 years?
Oh, no, you can't do it in those terms at all. Because what happens is as prices rise, previously economically inaccessible deposits become accessible. Because at a high enough price, I guess it makes sense to get that stuff. Right, so this is part of the reason why, for example, the Permian Basin emerged as wasn't just technology, is that prices made it economically feasible to pursue deposits that weren't possible to pursue because, you probably watched the Beverly Hillbillies. There was a time whenever you could just knock a hole in the ground and stuff shoots up and Jed gets rich.
Up from the ground came a bubbling crude.
Right, but that's the thing. So that era is long gone, and so now we're normalizing much higher prices, which makes previously
now it's up from 14 miles below the earth comes a bubbling crude.
And I have to send high pressure water sideways and fracture the so this is the answer. The answer is we don't know. We do know that it's becoming much less accessible, and the deposits become more expensive. Which is if you're in of an economics bent, is the market telling you find some other way to do this?
Yeah.
Right, and that's really the answer. Is the market's jumping up and down, shouting, and not just because of the prices, but also because of what's happening in the Middle East. It's become too strategic.
I just want to go on a slight tangent. This has been a lot about WTI and Brent and all things I knew earlier. But I now want to go on a slight tangent. There's been all this talk for the last few years of like China and Taiwan. And the military buildup in China and Taiwan. If they were going to go try to take Taiwan, is it now like I'm not trying to give anyone any ideas here. I'm sure you have your own military plans and strategy. But I'm just saying. I assume Xi is listening to my newsletter. Is it now like the perfect time? Like we're
now that he said Xi, he is listening now. But yes,
we're preoccupied. We're preoccupied, not just preoccupied, but
busy.
Of course. And I think
we've got more than one carrier group there.
And it's also
et cetera.
They've got their own Strait of Hormuz, right? I mean, literally, they do.
And the amazing thing is, it's also called the Strait of Hormuz.
Right? Strait of Brent. Actually,
isn't that crazy?
So, but the idea that all of these economic linkages can be used for purposes that you wouldn't have expected earlier on because we've become so dependent on them. So this idea that world trade.
What do you mean they have their own Strait of Hormuz?
So world trade, which was obviously the idea in macroeconomics for years, was that trade is a free lunch. Yeah. That the more I trade with other people and let them pursue comparative advantage, it's good for me and good for them. It was a free lunch. I wasn't just stealing.
This is the whole 90s.
Right. The Clinton, the liberalization of trade and so on. But what people didn't anticipate was all of these trade linkages themselves would be weaponized against modernity, so that I could actually say, I understand that you're dependent on me, and I'm going to use that against you because I've become the globally dominant supplier of, fill in the blank. And in the case of Taiwan, of semiconductors. And so that trade linkage is then weaponized. So what seemed like a good idea and was a free lunch and was part of with this idea that by creating all of these trade linkages, it'd be a more peaceful world, works until it doesn't. And what we're discovering now is that these things are increasingly weaponized and becomes your own Strait of Hormuz that you can then use to blackmail the rest of the world, which is now causing, of course, the U.S. to demand that TSMC, for example, build a semiconductor fabrication facility in Arizona. Is it Arizona or Texas? One or the other. And which is creating all this redundancy. So now it's like, wait a minute, why are we building these things here when it can be done more efficiently over there? Orthodox economics tells us it should be done over there. It's because the system's being weaponized. The entire trade system's being weaponized against us, against everyone, all participants. And so now the next big shift is going to be towards incredible amounts of redundancy in the system because of this problem of the system itself being weaponized. And so the answer is absolutely they should do it because not that I'm suggesting anything. Because if they don't do it now, that leverage goes away.
Correct.
The leverage goes away because the redundancy is being built back into the system, and you will
Now's your chance.
Now's your chance. You'll never have a moment when the semiconductor industry was your own Strait of Hormuz that you could blackmail the world with and get what you want.
But they won't do it because...
No, I'm not saying they won't.
You think they will?
I don't think anyone's saying they won't do it.
No,
I think a lot of people think they will do it, and it's getting increasingly timely.
I think that's exactly right. And that's what should be, because especially if you sort of go up a level and say, what's really going on, this world trade being weaponized, what do I have that's a weapon now that won't be a weapon in 5 years? I have this, use it or lose it.
Going back to oil for 1 minute.
We can go back to oil as long as you want.
Yeah. We are also in a situation where there has been a consumer pushback against EVs.
Yeah.
A lot of car companies are canceling their EVs. Consumers are no longer buying them in the way they were.
I don't understand that. I don't get why that's the case. I love mine.
What
do you have?
Don't worry about it.
You have the Bentley EV?
Wentworth, get me the electric Bentley.
Do you have a Tesla?
Wentworth, bring a plug. I feel like charging the car.
Do you have a Tesla?
It's not important.
You don't still have a Tesla, do you?
I have a Tesla Model S, an old Tesla Model S. I love it.
Yeah. Oh, they're great.
Yeah.
But I love all the Tesla stickers. There's like, I love my Tesla. I hate Elon Musk.
I bought it before the crazy guy went crazy.
But there's been a pushback. So then that is, again, in turn, driving up the prices and demand and so on and so forth. But why? Why not? What happened with the EVs that pushed the people pushed against them?
That's a U.S. phenomenon, though, right? I mean, it's still in Norway, for example. It's now they're the largest share.
We also don't have any of the Chinese EVs like BYD.
Right, the BYD stuff, which is like really aggressively priced. You can argue about whether we should or shouldn't have it, but this is not entirely, but largely a U.S. phenomenon. So there's a bunch of U.S. specific things. One of which is that the appearance and disappearance of subsidies creates this weird phenomenon. Like if someone offers you something for $50 and you know full on it was only worth $30, you get pegged to that price where you say, okay, you know what? It's still worth $50 to me, even though I know the market price is $30. Well, the same thing happens in EVs where you say, okay, these things are good, but you were previously willing to give me $15,000 subsidy. So take away the subsidies and suddenly people reprice it in their head and say, even though I might have been willing to buy this without the subsidy, the fact that a subsidy previously existed and is now gone, I'm out. I want my F-150 back.
Psychological pricing about anchoring on everything.
Right. So people anchored on a price that included a subsidy, even if they might have rationally purchased it without the subsidy. And now because the subsidy is gone, they say, well, I guess EVs are some kind of 2022 thing and I'm out. Right. And I think that's a huge factor, this psychological fact, leaving aside, the partisanship and everything else, anchoring on the subsidized price is part of the problem. So
to conclude, do you have any questions? Because I have a conclusion question.
It's all yours. I've asked all my leading questions.
I think that the angle that we haven't talked about that's worth talking about is the effect on AI.
Because of data centers and
and not just data centers, but I mean, there's all kinds of ways that energy plays back into this. Like in the data centers context, an increasing fraction of data centers are not connected to the grid. They're not connected to the grid because consumers are complaining about it because it's jacking up their prices. People still want to build data centers, so instead they're doing what's called behind-the-meter power, which is to say you show up with a natural gas turbine and say, it's fine, I'll power this myself. But it's powered by natural gas. Well, there's a finite supply of natural gas, even though we're operating within the U.S. marketplace. Now we have an aggressive new series of new buyers showing up who are bidding for the commodity. That's still going to have an impact on the price of the commodity, at least at the margin, even though we're not connected to what's happening in the Middle East. So the impact of all of this, the way it plays out, is that natural gas prices still end up going up here in part because of the existence of these data centers that are bidding up the prices of natural gas. And we still have a slight interaction with the U.S. Something like 3% of the U.S. product is exported. So you're still pulling in some of the global price. So I'd expect natural gas prices to slowly start working their way higher as this plays out. And so data center pricing begins to change. So you think about it like they're just factories producing tokens. Well, if my costs go up, but my token prices are going down and I'm debt financed, that's not good, right? Yeah. And so you can see how it becomes more problematic in terms of financing these things because of this, increasing costs, lower.
Fortunately, companies aren't issuing debt to finance these things.
It's a good thing, and let alone exotic financing vehicles like SPVs. It's all good. So that's a problem. But then even in semiconductor manufacturing, it's one of the most energy intensive processes on Earth. Natural gas plays a huge role in terms of silicon fabrication. And you can see that in Taiwan statistics. And so it plays directly into the cost. I'd expect to be some scarcity starts showing up in chip manufacturing as a result of what's changing in energy prices, which in turn plays back into NVIDIA's ability to get quantities of GPUs that it wants. So it plays out through all of these backdoor channels. And
so you're saying we should shorten a video?
Absolutely, go crazy. I'll watch.
You
Wait,
have a sum it up question.
I have a sum it up question, which is if you were to put on your economist hat and
like the magazine? No, not the magazine.
No, your hat as an economist.
Not really an economist.
You play one on TV.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, fine.
How does this all let's just say we pull out of Iran tomorrow. We don't go in, which we probably will, hypothetically, but let's just say that we don't. How long does it take for – actually, let's do two scenarios here. Let's do scenario one, which is Trump says, mission accomplished. We all go home. How long does it take for the economy to get back on track? Oil prices, gas, so on and so forth, all your ski goggles and so on. And then what is the scenario if we stay and there are boots on the ground? How long – what is the repercussions of that?
Well, the second one's almost impossible because there's no way to know. I mean, we didn't go into Vietnam planning just to stick around for a decade. No reason to expect you're going to be in and out of this one in short order, right? So I have to believe that it's going to take longer than we expect because, and they will at every turn test American resolve to have people. So imagine we've got some special forces people who are taken hostage. They're on television. Yeah. How long are Americans going to put up with it before they say, you know what, we don't need this because we've already largely self-sufficient with respect to many of these products. Get us out of there. Yeah. And so there's so many contingent ways it can break that have nothing to do with— And then it becomes
Trump's ego.
Winning or losing in war, right? So that one's almost impossible. The other one is easier to answer because we know roughly from the statistics we have how long it would take to rebuild what's already been destroyed. And the answer is probably less than 3 years, but certainly more than 6 months. And so that is the answer in terms of how quickly sort of the global system comes back online in terms of actually being able to function at the levels that it does now. And that's a really long time. That's an incredibly long time. It's something you can't— we've already at a point where it's like the Pottery Barn rule, you broke it, you bought it. We broke it and we bought it, right? So it's—
the Pottery Barn rule?
Actually, that was, I
don't know the Pottery Barn rule.
Pottery Barn? No, you were Crate and Barrel, same thing.
Yeah. Same thing. So the answer is it's already baked in. It's already baked in, right? It's going to be 6 months to 3 years before it all comes back out, and then your export markets are weakened because they're paying higher energy prices. They're not willing to pay as much to you for buying U.S. products. Blah blah blah. It plays out.
And how does that affect interest rates?
Inflation is going to be much higher, and so the pressure is going to be for at least marginally higher interest rates because you have. Right?
And then that's less housing sales and so on.
Right. And at the exact same time as the economy is weakening and job seekers are already saying this is the worst job market in memory.
And then AI takes all of our jobs. So it's—
And then we're all pets.
And we're all pets. Yeah. Last question. This is for both of you. Let's look at the worst case scenario. China decides to go into Taiwan. We go into Iran. Russia does something. How does that play out?
Well,
is that a disaster?
I think Wentworth doesn't get me that ivory-handled back scratcher I've had my eye on.
Yeah, I mean, that's the worst possible case, right?
Case.
It's hard to imagine how something like that doesn't have
massive global—
cascading consequences. It doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
Right?
It's always the second and third derivative consequences that
It's not like you said,
we seemingly don't
this isn't
think about.
Right, it's not like risk, right?
Yeah,
it's like, I'll take Kamchatka.
Yeah, it's not like you get Kamchatka and then it's done.
Right, I rolled 333. I'm going to take Iran. It doesn't work that way. So there's going to be this huge realignment if that happens in terms of spheres of influence and who controls what, and it's very hard to imagine it doesn't ripple much further.
Is there anything to learn from our time in Iraq on the global economy and to learn what would happen potentially with Iran?
Well, that if you don't finish the job, you end up in the same place just a couple of years later. And so let's say we declare victory.
Well, it's worse because if you don't finish the job, the ensuing regime that's now not gone is like
further radicalized.
I'm not coming back to Switzerland and talking to you.
Well, and they've learned a really good lesson though. They've learned that they have a toll booth, and the toll booth is the Strait of Hormuz. Right. Yeah. And so you can expect that to be. And they've floated the idea already. They've said that we'd like to charge. We will charge tolls in future for all passage through the strait. Wait a minute, we weren't monetizing that properly.
We weren't effectively monetizing the strait.
Right, yeah. We've now taught people that this is much more valuable than they thought and that they have full control over it. And what's the line from Dune? Like, who controls the thing or who can destroy the thing controls it? Yeah. And so it's the same thing. It doesn't matter whether it's spice or the Strait of Hormuz. They control it. And so that's the answer. That's what will happen.
Well, this has been another fun episode of the Nick, Dick, and Paul Show.
I had fun.
I had fun
too. This is really interesting to hear you talk about all this.
It's incredibly important.
But it's also a little it's daunting to think about the fact that even if we were to pull out today, which we will not, that it's going to take six months to 3 years to get back on track, and the implications of that are staggering.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. This has been the Nick, Dick, and Paul Show. Next week, the global quieting. Will it be quiet enough?
Can't wait.
Well, thanks for coming on as a guest today, Paul.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm here. You can expect a bill.